Hello and welcome to episode number 162, where I speak with Dr. Donn Brennan, who started out as a Western medical doctor and then trained with Maharishi Ayurveda and Transcendental Meditation. And we talk about how to access consciousness via Ayurveda and TM. So please stay tuned. Hello and welcome to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast. I'm your host Colette, and I hope to educate and empower you to take charge of your health and well-being, preventing disease in the body and mind so that you can thrive in life. I will be sharing the holistic teachings of Ayurveda, the ancient healing tradition from India. I will also discuss topics like yoga, which is the sister science of Ayurveda, health and wellness, nutrition, fitness, and mindfulness practices, as well as interviewing lots of inspiring people along the way. My humble wish is to help you to connect to your true nature, to Mother Nature, and to help you to connect to each other. If you're new to Ayurveda, I recommend that you start by listening to the first couple of episodes where I do an introduction to Ayurveda and the mind-body types. Now, if you like the content, please subscribe to the show so the new episodes will automatically download for you to enjoy. I've also set up a Facebook group for us to connect and to support each other, and I'd love for you to join me over at the Elements of Ayurveda podcast group. And now, here's the show. Today's episode is sponsored by Kerala Ayurveda. Kerala Ayurveda is a full-spectrum, seed-to-shelf Ayurvedic company with deep roots in India, offering education, wellness, and products. Kerala is thrilled to make authentic Ayurvedic products available in the US. Following the traditional methods of herbal preparations, each recipe is traced to the root Vedic texts, beginning with the highest quality ingredients. As an Elements of Ayurveda listener, you're invited to enjoy 15% off your next purchase of Kerala Ayurveda products, including herbal oils, formulations, herbal ghees or gritams, arishtams, cleansers, soaps, creams, and more. To learn more, visit keralaayurveda.store. and use the code ELEMENTS to receive your 15% discount. That's keralaayurveda.store and use the code ELEMENTS to receive your 15% discount. And you can find that link to Kerala Ayurveda in the show notes. Hello and welcome back to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast. Today I'm very happy to introduce you to Dr. Donn Brennan, who was one of the first Western medical doctors to train in India in the Maharishi Vedic approach to health. He qualified in medicine in 1979 at University College Dublin. During the following decade, he worked in different specialities in hospitals and then as a GP, a general practitioner. Also during this time, he trained in Maharishi Ayurveda. During 1982, he qualified as a teacher of Transcendental Meditation. For 18 months during 1984 to 1985, he studied Maharishi Ayurveda in America and in the government-run Ayurveda University in Jamnagar in India. Since 1990, Dr. Brennan has worked full-time promoting, lecturing, and consulting in Maharishi's Vedic approach to health. He is featured in many newspaper articles and on radio and television programs. He has lectured and consulted in almost all the major cities in Ireland and Britain, as well as Iceland and the Channel Islands. Dr. Brennan has given many seminars, advanced talks, and courses, including introductory courses for medical doctors and pulse diagnosis courses. Many thousands have consulted with him for health advices. He was the founding president of the Ayurveda Practitioners Association in the UK, and he now lives in Dublin with his wife and Dr. Brennan. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's lovely to be with you.
Oh, I'm delighted to have you. And I'm absolutely intrigued by your story, going from being a Western medical trained doctor, moving more into the path of Ayurveda. And that's where I'd love to begin the chat, Dr. Brennan. If you could tell us about your discovery of TM, Transcendental Meditation, which I believe led you then into the discovery of Ayurveda.
That's true, Colette. That's true. I suppose I came to medicine because I was looking to understand life and to understand how then to help people to sort out their lives.
Right.
The suffering was so obvious and there didn't seem to be any wisdom or solution to it. So medicine seemed the best way. But during the medicine, the course, about the second year in, I felt I needed something for myself because I was finding the pressures of study and the intensity of deadlines so I learned Transcendental Meditation, and it left me happier and more relaxed. But what happened over the years, because I was a medical student, people always wished to tell you about their complaints. People were saying, well, my skin cleared up when I learned TM, my migraines cleared. My ulcer cleared. So I thought there's something more to this. And so when I was actually qualified in medicine, after 2 years, I went off to become a TM teacher and then ended up working in casualty when I came back, which left me with a huge dilemma because the medical approach, especially in casualty, you see people hobbling in and then they walk out, maybe with a plaster of Paris, but in a sense they're restored. But at the same time, teaching people TM, I was seeing great transformations for some in relation to their mental and physical health. So I couldn't understand the connection between them until a cardiologist who attended the first course that was organized in Europe for doctors, medical doctors, on Ayurveda by Maharishi Yogi, who had brought TM out to the West. And he said it connects consciousness and the physiology, and I was hooked. And so I thought, well, I have to do this. I'm going to be sort of totally disintegrated myself if I don't have that level of integration. I could not understand Ayurveda or Transcendental Meditation from a medical point of view, not fully. Right. I could see the hormones, changing, the stress hormones or the brainwave coherence when people practice. But what was the fundamental understanding? Medicine didn't have it. But it sounded like Ayurveda would have the fundamental connection that would explain medicine. And that's what took me off. It started in America and ended up in India. Wow. And if I went back a step to about 1978, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi had at that stage, over 20 years of traveling the world, a structure of about a global network in 120 countries of centers where people were learning TM. And he wished to revive all the Vedic traditions, not just TM. TM was to him like a key to introduce a whole library of knowledge, because Veda is not only the tradition, the Vedic tradition of India. Veda refers to the essence of our being, to the field of the basis of life, to that absolute immortal, unbounded, eternal awareness or consciousness, which for each of us is becoming lively as the intelligence within us, which organizes the physical structure of our body. So each of us creates, constructs, governs, becomes our body. And we do so from this fundamental aspect of consciousness, which of course we all share, and which Maharishi was very keen that actually accessing that field through a simple technique of transcendental meditation would begin to wake people up, and then they would start to see the benefit of all these old traditions based on that concept. So Ayurveda is that fundamental field of consciousness generating our health. Stapachaveda is how that field organizes in orderly principles of structuring to generate the structures of the universe. And of course, you can use it as an architectural process to design new buildings. Gandharva Veda music is the rhythms that are replete throughout the universe. And So our listening to those rhythms is listening to the flow of nature, its harmonics, and it integrates us. So like all these Vedic knowledges or sciences, has as their basis that field of consciousness. And he then, went back, talked to Dr. Triguna and a few other doctors, Dr. Dwivedi, who had been a chancellor in the Ayurveda University in Jamnagar, Dr. Balaraj Maharishi, who is absolutely famous and was an advisor to the state of Andhra Pradesh. And so he got foremost Ayurvedans together and with their help went about globalizing Ayurveda. And it's interesting that Dr. Triguna, who was at that time the president of the All India Ayurveda Congress of the Association of 400,000 Ayurvedic physicians in India, that he and his son suffered Maharishi in 1978, and his son is now the president of that association, and totally committed to the concept that they discussed, that Maharishi with them started to globalize Ayurveda. So it's that was, I suppose, where eventually I got tied in, because it was Maharishi that organized my course, an international course for doctors on Ayurveda. And it was Dr. Dwivedi that caused us to end up in Jamnagar. And we went visiting various facilities after our course there. Great pharmaceutical companies generating the Ayurvedic herbal preparations, names that are world known. But we were very shocked at the standards. So one thing Maharishi also did was set up a pharmaceutical company to produce Ayurvedic products in a modern facility, the most modern of facilities, but by the most ancient traditional practices. And so he had a pharmaceutical laboratory there to measure the active principles and to establish the signatures scientific of the raw ingredients, so everything, and then the final product excellently pure. And so in doing that and achieving international renowned standards, other pharmacies in India have actually, by virtue of the competitive, the competition, have been forced to raise their standards. So Maharishi was very astute in how he sort of went about reviving. But his essential message was that consciousness was being forgotten in the Ayurveda as it practiced in India. And then when we think about Charaka, the most ancient text, we have what a shloka or verse says, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, Ayurveda, Malrutanam. So Ayurveda is the root, not just of doing your duty, Dharma, not just of gaining wealth in all its aspects, not just in terms of achieving your desires, but also moksha, gaining enlightenment. And in truth, it is a path to enlightenment, because health in Ayurveda is swastha, and swa means the self, and sta is to be established. To be established in the self means to be totally awake in that inner field of consciousness, and for it to be totally unobstructed in its flow, so that mind becomes absolutely the conduit of all that innate potential of love and joy and energy and vitality. And this is health. It's the state of enlightenment. So Ayurveda is wonderful because, while we're taking care of our digestion and getting a good night's sleep, we're also spurring on and speeding up the process of unfolding of this immense, amazing potential, which is our nature, which is that fundamental divine being of consciousness, and now finding more and more pure, balanced, integrated expressions in terms of our Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, orchestrating and organizing our mind and our body. And so we come to live the fullness of life, which is the whole purpose of Ayurveda. And this was what I was looking for when I went into medicine and didn't find, because I wanted to know, why do people suffer? And of course, Ayurveda, Charaka again describes it, pragya parat, the mistake of the intellect where we look out. And in that process, associate ourselves with our work, our family, our friends, and at the same time, we lose the memory of who we are because we have forgotten to look in. So Maharishi always talked about the light at the door. We need to look out, but we need to look in. And that's the significance of allowing the mind to settle in the most innocent and simple way without any effort, so that it does what it would love to do, what it naturally can do, which is to come to rest, to be still. And in that stillness, to awaken to that unboundedness, that immortal being. And, Charaka even describes in the chapter on anatomy, it actually even describes it. But Charaka will say in the first chapter that life, that body, mind, and consciousness, so that they're the tripod. So, and this combination exists for the sake of Purusha. This is the subject of Ayurveda. It's about the body, it's about the mind, but it's about consciousness. And Sushruta says the same thing, that Purusha is nothing but a combination of that self-conscious self and the 5 kinds of matter, which are the 5 Mahabhutas. And Bhagavan Dash and P.V. Sharma, in their translation of Charaka, they say that both Sushruta and Charaka attempt an explanation of consciousness from the material point of view. That's what's beautiful about Ayurveda, because it's coming at something which is so abstract.
Yes.
And yet it's materially manifesting. It's explained how that happens and how we can take advantage of that wisdom to awaken. It's like a mirror. It's like a mirror that it reminds us. When we take to Ayurveda, we are reminded, oh, this is my nature, and this is what I should eat, and this is how I should sleep, and this is the exercise. And so Ayurveda is wonderful in that it's helping us to recognize what we already know.
Beautiful.
And so Charaka talks about yoga, which means the settled mind. And it talks about the state of yoga, where happiness and misery disappear when the mind is concentrated and contained in the soul. That's Sharirastan, chapter 5, verse 15. So the yoga is the settled mind, and that's, in my experience, what TM is. It's just the settled mind. Charaka then gives the insight as to how we overcome pragyaparat through this yoga, through the settled mind. And then Charaka says the power of metaphysical memory, as it was translated. We could say the awareness of consciousness constitutes the best way of liberation, as shown by the liberated ones. In other words, the best way to enlightenment is shown by the enlightened ones.
Yeah.
And persons who, following this way, do not come back to worldly traps. This is the best way to attain yoga as well as moksha. So the whole tradition is about regularly allowing the awareness to quieten. Now, it's very fascinating that the modern research shows that when that happens with TM, that all the brain waves from all parts, front and both sides, come together in one coherent waveform, which means billions of brain cells firing in synchrony. And so this integration, this process of integration, practiced twice a day, causes the capacity of that style of functioning to be retained during activity. So one becomes more settled in the middle of the chaos. And then, of course, there's less wear and tear. It's interesting, stress hormones drop dramatically. And again, in regular practice, there's less cortisol throughout the day. And the same thing that the frontal areas of the brain are managing directors get 200 to 300% of blood flow during the TM, increased blood flow. And then again, you see, that is our higher functions, which are being awakened, as it were. But basically how it works is that deep interconnecting bundles of nerve fibers, which connect various parts of the brain, are starting to be exercised to bring that coherence again that allows a greater awareness to start manifesting. And that then is seen in terms of far less hospital attendance, up to 70% less hospital attendance, outpatients and inpatients for TM versus controls over all the illnesses, basically, except for pregnancy. Actually, the meditators ended up in hospital more because they had to deliver babies. So you have to be a little bit more aware of your family planning, perhaps, if you're doing your meditation regularly.
Right.
The other thing is the attendance at GPs, drops for the two years after starting the TM. So it's very profoundly impacting your health, because remember, we are this tripod: consciousness, mind, body, and all the TM is doing is coming in from the level of consciousness only by virtue of our attention awakening it, and then that awakening influencing the mind and body. Whereas, yes, we'll do panchakarma to come in from a physical side, or we will use strategies to align our thinking with health in Ayurveda to work from the mind side. So in all these different ways in Ayurveda, we can synergize that process of evolution, which we came on this world for, to express and manifest and enjoy more and more and more. And so Ayurveda is not just about getting rid of our headache. It actually may start there for many, but by gosh, it is a continuous road that we can enjoy more and more in life through knowing how to take care of ourselves and overcoming this pragya-parad, having a lamp at the door that's lighting inside and out, so that we recognize our nature and our needs and appropriately fulfill them.
Absolutely. Beautifully said. Thank you so much. And it's fascinating that Maharishi had this plan, and this was in 1950s, correct?
He came out of India in 1957 with nothing. Wow. He sat in an airport until someone talked to him. And really? That's where it started, and he created this global organization. But he just had total innocence. I didn't know, how it would unfold, but he went with the whole flow. And yes, his whole purpose was, and this is what got to him, he was lost in the Himalayas as basically as a recluse, and it's just a thought kept coming to him, and it was that the Vedas say life is bliss, right? His experience was life is bliss. I mean, he was known as the giggling guru because he was always laughing. He had an immense sense of humor, and he was very, very happy, and he radiated, and of course that's what attracted people to him. So he said that he think to himself, yeah, life is bliss, but why are people suffering? And it was that brought him out of the Himalayas, and it was that brought him around the world, because he recognized when he came out of the Himalayas for about a year, he was just traveling in India and talking and teaching the TM, and then he reckoned it would take 200 years for the world to have this technique if he kept going in India. So that's what the impulse. They told someone to organize a flight for him, and they told him he'd need a passport. And he was so innocent, he didn't even realize that. But anyway, he arrived, and because he felt if the West took to it, India would take to it quicker, because looking to the West and to science. Right. But he worked. He had an incredible intellect, and he gathered quantum physicists over the years. And there's a very fascinating piece of research done by a quantum physicist called John Hagelin, a very brilliant man, who asked the question, is consciousness the unified field? And what he does is he takes Maharishi's descriptions of consciousness, and, like consciousness is infinite, it's immortal, it's unbounded, it has all these attributes, you could say, but by virtue of aligning them, he could look at the mathematical theories in quantum physics and isolate which part of that mathematical theory was referring to that particular quality of consciousness. So on the basis of consciousness, he correlated the quantum theorist's perspective or insight with the Ayurveda. And then he took it a stage further, that there are 5 spin particles in quantum field theory. And these spin particles give rise to the various energies and matter fields. And so he could correlate them precisely with the air, space, fire, water, and earth. Up another level, he could correlate Vata, Pitta, Kapha with the bosons, fermions, and the gauge symmetry. And the point was he could make so many correlations, and then he could do an analysis of probability on them. And the conclusion is very definite, that they're the same underlying reality being described in both traditions. It's just quantum physics has now gone so deep. It's describing one underlying unified field, the basis of the whole universe. And that description, when properly understood by quantum physicists, can be absolutely seen to be the same description as what Ayurveda describes as how we unfold our consciousness through these Mahabhutas into our Vata, Pitta, Kapha, into our body. And as is the universe, so is the individual, according to Chapter. And there, again, how these principles are seen in terms of the universe, in terms of the individual in Ayurveda. So it's the same insight, but the difference is the quantum physicist, it would be hundreds, thousands of years before practical applications. Like at one level, we now have laser. That's quite a superficial level of quantum field theory. But it takes so many time to develop the technologies out of the insights that are gained. But Ayurveda has all the technologies already there for our quality and improvement of life. And that's the beauty. So Maharishi, through many strategies then, was promoting Ayurveda around the world. And one of them was to train up us doctors. Another was to Ayurvedic doctors from India were being sent all over the world. Centers doing consultations, giving talks. Another strategy was to make one man world famous. And he kept saying in the late 80s, we will make Deepak Chopra world famous. And they did it. He did it. Basically by introducing Chopra at a very high level in society all around the world, by having the book Perfect Health written and having it bought up by all the centers in America when it came out. So it went into the top 10 on the New York Times best reader list, And so by these sort of strategies, Chopra was shot to world fame. But Chopra then sort of disconnected thereafter with Maharishi, or Maharishi disconnected from Chopra, whichever way it went. Because Maharishi is very pure, Tannika, really. You just stick to the old text. You only follow the tradition, whereas Chopra would be a little bit looser.
Yes.
So this was another strategy to globalize Ayurveda. And Maharishi gave Chopra all that wonderful knowledge about the consciousness, the unified field, which came out in Chopra's subsequent books, And so, it was fantastic to witness all of this and to see where Ayurveda was at and to be able to see how it is unfolding. Now, I thought like it would only be a couple of years. It's so obviously good, Ayurveda. Yes. I mean, anybody can see it.
Yes.
And I thought, sure, this would be a great career. Like, I was very, very busy.
Yeah.
Was very busy going around talking to 3 or 4 people in this place and moving on to that place, 30 different centers, just visiting it, the way I thought to spread it.
Yeah.
But here I am now, and I'd be happy to retire. But I'm still waiting for it to happen.
I know.
It is happening.
It is happening. What's your thoughts on why it hasn't taken off and why now? Which is great that we need this.
Because we have a mindset which is locked into the reductionist paradigm.
Yeah.
And the way the doctors are trained, they actually they have a particular point of view. Now, mind you, when you are 6 years in training and then another 10 getting specialist training, the network of connections in your brains that now are the materialistic expression of all your learning allows you to see the world in that perspective. Yeah. And, it has been 500 years of evolving this reductionist sort of way of looking at the world, which, had some benefits. But for the past 50 years, medicine has not advanced at all. Before that, there were coming like antibiotics or hormone treatments, which were, very effective and very useful. But it's sort of got the medical mindset going that, one cause for one disease and then one medicine.
Right.
And of course, all of that is completely supported by huge monies of pharmaceutical industry.
Yes, of course.
And so it's very hard for the medical people now to see that, that one ingredient, which, like when we take food, for example, we ingest food, we're not injecting curcumin, the active ingredient of turmeric. We're injecting hundreds of active principles, which now meet thousands of chemicals in our digestive system, and the complex interactions are incredible, and then absorbed and meet absolutely thousands of potential pathways of biochemistry, and every ingredient we've eaten is affecting the whole such that other ingredients and how they're being treated by the body are affected. Right. And so it's innumerable combinations of immense complexity that a reductionist rote looking at one thing at one time can never comprehend the whole. And that is why, the limitations of medicine is meaning that there is no progress, basically, in the last 50 years. And that's becoming so apparent at a time when, as you point out, it's actually that we wake up or die, because we're going to destroy the planet if we don't learn to live in tune with the laws of nature that are governing this planet. And we're going to destroy ourselves unless we learn to live in tune. I mean, all our obsession with eating meat has meant that we have become far too intertwined with the animal kingdoms. Yes. And a lot of from measles to polio, there's suggestions that all of these that we have suffered from, they're all coming from animal kingdom. Take AIDS as another recent example. And now this virus, it's fiddling around with bats in China, probably or perhaps could have been. But if we had an insight into how we should relate with nature and with the animal kingdom, then the mistakes we're making would not be happening, and the consequence of those mistakes wouldn't be visiting us.
Right. So we're living through the consequences of our own actions right now.
We are, and this is the learning process, and that's why this pandemic could have immense possible benefits when even now we see the globe for the first time as a whole, mankind, womankind, all together focused on solving one problem. This is wonderful, and this is the start of coherent search for truth and answers.
It's so true, because when you talk about that, the reductionist view in the medical model, in the Western medical model, and, it goes hands in hand with our individualism in the world today, right? That throughout the centuries, we've become more individualistic, and that's the problem as well. So this connecting that, like Ayurveda did, this connecting of consciousness with physiology is the answer to this reductionist system in medicine and this individualism in our society today.
Colette, you are a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful individual. Right. Now, when you settle down and your mind transcends, this unique and awesome expression of the divine, which is Colette, has immediately gained strength and increased individuality. But something else happened, Colette, when you did that. Because in connecting with that field of consciousness, you have very sublimely not only awoken that field for me, but you had a connection with me and with everybody. And so while growing in individual uniqueness, you're also awakening a connection. And that connection means that there is a possibility of a harmonious interaction through a common source. That's why the meditation is actually key. And that's why very interesting research, which, there's 40 sociological studies that show it. When large groups of people do TM in any society, whether it's a city or a province or even nationally, you get reduction in crime, reduction in accident rates, you get improving patent applications. You get indications of the society actually becoming more integrated, more wholesome. And because that field transcends us all and yet is our source. And if you tickle the field over there, Colette, I'll be laughing over here. So, and that's why, people are waking up. The materialistic perspective hasn't worked. We need to regain our memory. We need to be more truly ourselves. We need to settle down and be still. And in that stillness is that wakefulness. And that wakefulness, that awareness as a regular experience starts through the plasticity of the nervous system to create structures that can have far greater wisdom and insight and joy in life.
So true. And that's, what Ayurveda teaches us is that we come from consciousness, as you mentioned earlier, the principles of existence is that we come from this pure consciousness mixed with the 5 Panchamahabhutas, the 5 elements of nature.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's just the paradigm we've grown up with is a materialistic perspective where we see the world in that particular viewpoint. And then on the other hand, if we woke up from the field of consciousness and saw the world from that point of view, everything would be in its place. All would flow effortlessly and in joy and love. And that's why Ayurveda is so significant, so wonderful, because it not just gives us that key, which Maharishi was keen we should all share in order to eliminate suffering. Maharishi went back to revive the Ayurvedic tradition to give us more strategies, because it's a slow process. We want to accelerate it. We'd love to be enlightened, in a minute's time, but it's a life's work, and we can speed it up. We can speed it up by having 8 hours sleep, by eating the main meal in the middle of the day. Practical, pragmatic things, and this is what Ayurveda brings us, so that we can actually regain our integrity and our health, and then move on to unfold more fulfillment and joy in life.
So true. And this is exactly what we need right now, because Ayurveda gives us that manual, that step-by-step guidelines, and connects us to nature, because as you mentioned a moment ago, it's our disconnection and disrespect for nature, which is leading to a lot of these problems. When you look at the state of our world now, we're definitely going through a state of crisis, but it's also a state, hopefully, of awakening, and it needs to start with each individual, right?
Absolutely. I mean, every individual who takes to Ayurveda, and I would say profoundly, if they would awaken, and I think for me the Transcendental Meditation was a fantastic, effortless way of just enjoying that. Every individual has very profound effect. And so just doing that has influencing those around them on a very sublime level. And so it is true that to have a green forest, you want all the trees to be green. But I think the power and impact of this knowledge is so profound that it may not need all the trees to be green, as it were, but it needs a proportion, a significant proportion, for the collective awareness in the society or in the world to suddenly recognize and be fully awake. So that is a growing phenomena which we have the joy of witnessing. That's what's taking time, and I just have to be patient and stay with Ayurveda so that I can live long enough to see it finally come about.
Well, yeah, but you have played a big role, especially with the Ayurvedic Practitioners Association in the UK, and you've had a big role in this spreading of this knowledge and continue to have that big role in it.
Well, I would say, Colette, every one of us has a massive role. We're just instruments in an awakening, a collective process. And so every one of us just wants to do our bit. And that, if everyone doing their bit, is what matters. Any one individual, it's insignificant what they do, but it's highly significant what the collective can do. And that is fantastic. There's another aspect which is more profound again, and this actually is a revival at the most profound level. There were all these Vedic traditions in India, and they carried down in family lineages, and they gave rise to all different categories of Vedic, which eventually were written down as literatures. Really an old tradition, though, family-orientated, father to son, to daughter. And so these family lineages were fading, because they were being ignored. And Maharishi went about training the children of these family lineages. And, there's about, there must be about 15,000, 20,000 at least of these children who've now grown up in their family lineages, practicing their traditional chanting ceremonies. But these are highly significant because the Veda also was aware of the frequencies and reverberations within the field of consciousness, like a seed ready to sprout, but not yet sprout, but lively for sprouting. In the consciousness, just as it's about to manifest material form, a universe or any of our bodies, those frequencies were heard, and these were the Vedic knowledge. And just those chants and following those traditional procedures just awoken that field of consciousness, even on a global level. And that was something else Maharishi succeeded in reviving. And, there are groups of many thousands of these doing their performances together, which are just mind-blowing, actually, to hear. But profoundly, as it were, integrating the flow of consciousness in its original, as it were, patterns of unfoldment. Because that oneness of consciousness becomes the multiple diversity of innumerable processes and structures in Colette, and yet it's all in a natural sequential flow. And when that sequence of unfoldment is maintained perfect, total connection back to the consciousness is always maintained. And so those were more strategies by virtue of that perfect sequence and flow of those ancient chants, were actually reconnecting us by virtue of restoring the sequence to that field of consciousness. And of course, those sort of strategies become far more powerful for each of us as each of us awakens more and more on the deeper, quieter inner levels, through our regular practices of meditation and through keeping the mind and body working in an integrated, balanced way.
Absolutely. It's amazing. And like you're saying, these chants or these mantras repeated through the body, that vibration has a big effect on our body, because we are vibrational beings, energy, consciousness together.
We are totally. And it was fascinating to see Maharishi actually unfold and for the first time explain, because someone who's into yoga might have a very strong argument with someone who's into Vedanta, because Vedantan thinks he's right and the yoga thinks he's right. This is the way the world is,
Yes.
But Maharishi explained how, as part of this orderly sequential flow, yoga is that state of settled mind. It's the transcendent awakening. And how, when that transcendence awakens, we move on from yoga to karma mimamsa. And that karma mimamsa is allowing us actually to awaken in all our perceptions to see the finest aspect of life, the divine. And in awe and wonder and pure love, that starts awakening ours. And then we move on to Vedanta, where we recognize everything is one.
Yeah.
I am that, thou art that, everything is that. And so in that sort of fashion, Maharishi organized the whole of the Vedic literature, showing each literature where it lay in this flow, in this unfoldment. I'll give you a taste of
please.
Vedic chant.
Oh, that'd be wonderful.
Great. Close your eyes and you can go nowhere but deep within.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's so true. And my understanding that the ancient Vedic texts, they were passed down orally for many generations. And so that was almost like this chanting.
Oh, absolutely. That's the Mahamrityunjay, which is related to health and long life, And so exactly, this is what children would have learned from the age of 8 they'd be sitting with their parents. These chants, they would just imbibe them, they would take them in. And it's just a wonder that, that has been saved for the world, because it could have got lost. And so that is ongoing now. It's just wonderful to know there are all these different approaches to unfoldment. And, somebody may take the yoga, but somebody else can do it from a different angle.
That's it, just different paths.
Exactly.
Yeah. And what amazes me, Dr. Brennan, is that we're going back to these ancient wisdoms because of this realization that, yes, we did advance in technology, but our spirit is lacking. And so now we're going back to these ancient wisdoms to try to discover what's wrong, what are we missing.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's in the nick of time. In the nick of time. I mean, one of the things Maharishi was brilliant at doing was locating the absolute expert in whatever area within India. He would network and then bring them out. And one of the mentors I was honored to meet was Balaraj Maharishi, who Maharishi called the king of the plant kingdom. He only had to hold a plant and go within, and he could tell you then everything about it. He had the working knowledge of 6,000 different plants.
Oh my goodness.
And but his presence was just so sublime. And at one stage he said, and it was a wonderful way of thinking about it, he said that the deity of the plants had appeared to him and said that the plants want to help mankind to wake up.
Wow. Wow.
So the plants want us to use them for us to become more ourselves. And of course, that's the beauty of plants, isn't it? They have a specific intelligence, which when we know what plant, we make the choice and it reconnects us. It realigns that intelligence within us. And so we heal. But his sublime perspective was taking into account the consciousness that manifested the plant as a means of, balancing our consciousness through the plant.
Absolutely, yeah. Because essentially what we're intaking is becoming ourselves in tissues, and each cell has its own consciousness.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's just fascinating, Dr. Brennan, and I could talk to you all day.
And I would enjoy it.
It's just a fascinating approach. I did want to touch on something for people who are not familiar with TM, Transcendental Meditation. Could you give people a little bit more of an understanding of it? I'm aware that some people may not be familiar with it and how it's practiced.
Yeah, well, this was actually brought by Maharishi from the Shankaracharya tradition, high in the Himalayas. It was a traditional technique for people who are busy in the world, not for recluses, because it works by becoming still and then becoming busy and exercising the nervous system in those two veins of integrated silence and then busyness. That's what cultures the nervous system. So the busier you are, the more you get from it. It's the scientists have now defined 3 types of meditation. One is like compassion meditation of the Buddhists, and of course it's brilliant. It develops compassion. That part of the brain to do with emotion you see more richly innervated in time. And then there's the mindfulness types of techniques, which develop attention, and the brain structures to do with attention get enlivened. But those are actually directing the attention and involve the mind in activities of compassion or of attention. Whereas TM is letting go. And it's interesting, it's that the whole of the nervous system starts to be impacted, not just any specific part, but all the connections between parts. And so the TM is just no effort. You don't direct the mind. The mind is given an opportunity to take its own direction. Now, the mind would love a rest. It's the attractiveness of that field of consciousness at the deepest level that is drawing the mind in. So it's a very effortless procedure, which distinguishes it subjectively, as well as the objective research distinguishing it. It's taught around the world by Maharishi, taught many tens of thousands of TM teachers in a specific standardized traditional manner. It's taught the same way as it was taught thousands of years ago. It's a very standardized technique, and so it works for everybody. And so anybody who's interested could go on www.tm- and then the country they're in. And that should bring it up. Like in Ireland, it's tm-ireland.ie. So that should bring up a website. There's another fantastic website. David Lynch was a very, very famous movie director who was distressed by the stress that some children had to go through to get to school, never mind the school. Like, they'd go through metal detectors to take the weapons off them, and they'd have police patrolling the corridors in these schools. And he set up a charity to bring TM to these schools, and the kids settle down and they end up going on to university, and the schools can way up the league. So then he started introducing to the military, who eventually did the research to show, because he was concerned for post-traumatic stress disorder. Well, TM is the best strategy for dealing with that. It published in the Lancet 2 years ago. It's funded by the American military. And then he went into, the various traditional peoples who are, under great stress in the Americas. Like that website, David Lynch Foundation, has so much on it that's very interesting.
Great. That's
www.tm- davidlynchfoundation.org.
Oh, very interesting. And in TM, each person is given their own individual mantra.
That's true. The TM teachers are taught, how to select those. And so people do get that particular sound or mantra, and then also the method of using it. And it's very simple, Sound has its impact,
Yeah.
There's two aspects generally to the sounds we use. There's the meaning aspect. Like if I say the word door, your attention is directed to the door. So the meaning gives your mind a direction. And the mind is constantly moving from meaning to meaning to meaning. You see? So it's held on that level. But the mantra is a specific sound which has no meaning. It should have no meaning. If it has any meaning, that is a distortion of the ancient tradition. It's a misunderstanding. So it's its sound value and not any meaning. So the sound, however, like some sounds you don't know a mile from, the scratching of nails on a blackboard was one when we were growing up. But other sounds are so resonant and harmonious that the mind tends to rest there, likes it, stays with it. And then hears it the quieter level as it's coming up from within, quieter. And as it's doing that, it's getting more and more alert, quieter alert, hearing quieter and quieter levels. So it's a funny thing, you're getting more alert and more settled.
Yeah.
Till then, occasionally, absolute wakefulness emerges. It doesn't matter if it does or it doesn't. It's the process and the regular practice of that which unwinds the physiology and clears from the body the tensions and stresses that are the consequence of the pragyaparat, the way we've lived. You see. So it's an ongoing, therefore, process of clearing or purification of our whole nervous system, while it's now more capable of its integrated style of functioning and that cultivates, goes by.
Yeah, it's like a purification, like I said, or cleansing of undigested emotions or anything that's causing ill effect in your body.
Colette, we can think of it in terms of mental ama, physical ama, but the body's designed to clear that. And one profound way of clearing it is rest. So we always, when we get sick, we go to bed, we rest. But that's the interesting thing. The TM is a far more profound rest. And it's deep as sleep or deeper. But it's a different form of rest where alertness is retained. That combination seems to enliven the healing capacities to allow the restoration of integrity and to clear the ama.
So interesting. So fascinating. Like I said, Dr. Brennan, I could keep going this conversation, but we'll have to leave it there for today. But I really want to thank you for taking the time this morning to join us. It's an absolute pleasure to chat with you. And I'd love for you to tell us where people can find out more about you, Dr. Brennan, and your work and your offerings.
It's easy. www.ayurveda.ie. IE is for Ireland.
Very
IE.
Good. Very
so
good.
That website, ayurveda.ie, then the consultations, the courses we do. There's a free 8-lesson course that anybody could book into to introduce all the deep concepts of Ayurveda. That's the best.
Wonderful. And I'll put that link in the show notes for people to access. It's an absolute pleasure to connect with you, and thank you for everything you shared today with such great insights.
Well, thank you, Colette. It was a great joy.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Dr. Brennan. Please check out the show notes for the link to that website, ayurveda.ie. If you think that this episode will be helpful to family or friends, please share it with them. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the podcast so the new episodes will automatically download for you. And if you feel called to do so, please rate and review the podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. I would really appreciate that. Thank you so much for tuning in. Take good care of yourself. Be well and slán go fóill. Bye for now.